Hello, everyone, and welcome back into Swarm Talk here on the Crowded Booth, all things Georgia Tech. And it's time for another Behind the Enemy Lines podcast with a guy that I'm familiar with. A lot of Georgia Tech fans have been getting in your comments lately here, Ben, but they don't know that you were the guy that kind of gave me that opportunity. And it was Georgia State that I covered in that very first game at now Center Park Stadium. Against Kennesaw State. Seems like such a long time ago, but Ben, man, pumped to have you on and talk about a matchup that I think Tech fans, Georgia State fans, and just the city of Atlanta is really excited about.
Yeah, no question, Bryce, and I appreciate you having me. We go back a long ways, and I'm forever grateful for you and your contribution in the brief time that I had you. I told many folks, I said I'm not going to have this kid very long because he's going to be a superstar. So I'll take whatever I can get, and proud of everything that you've done, and happy we can jump in. But yeah, I mean you nailed some significant points. I think this game matters in the state of Georgia. I think this game matters significantly in Metro Atlanta.
Mhm.
Both programs now are locked in, recruiting Metro Atlanta and the state of Georgia extremely well. It's a focus for both head coach Brent Key and Dell McGee. We can certainly talk further, and we'll get into it. And I just told you off air, I'm working on kind of a connections piece between Georgia Tech and Georgia State, both on and off the field. These two schools and institutions have been intertwined for legitimately 100 years,
Yeah.
going back to the John Heisman and Bobby Dodd days, and throughout Bill Curry, and now we know obviously there'll be former Tech players and former Georgia State players lining up on the field, and with the game Tech's under their belt, and certainly a big top 10 win there in Dublin. The Georgia State coaches have some film now on the jackets, right? So you
Yeah.
kind of know what the tendencies are, and how is the chess match now with Coach Key and his staff to kind of go into the home opener. So I'm excited. I'm hoping for a great crowd. I know Tech fans will be excited, and I know Georgia State fans will be as well.
Yeah, this should be a fun one on many different levels, Ben. But I just want to get this out of the way, and I've gotten ripped in my comment section about this. Regardless of what happened on Saturday, if Tech would have beaten Florida State or not, this is your prototypical trap game for a lot of reasons. I mean, let's just talk about you're coming all the way across the pond per se. I mean, you got to come all the way back across the Atlantic. You don't kind of get what Florida State gets, where yeah they lost, but they at least have till next Monday, Labor Day evening, to play. So just by that metric, regardless if people think that Georgia State's this juggernaut Sunbelt team or not, just the way this game falls on your schedule, and then you add in all those factors, kind of explain maybe to the Tech fans that are not necessarily wanting to hear it, and the State fans that I think follow your suit of this has all the makings, especially now that Georgia Tech has gone and won the big game, and obviously probably feeling good about themselves.
There's no doubt. So you and I have talked a long time, known each other a long time. I grew up a Florida State fan, right? So Georgia State's only had a program since 2009. My parents are from the state of Florida. My dad was accepted into Florida State University. Wanted to be a marching chief. I've been going to Florida State games with Coach Bowden, basically since I was a youngin'. So had season tickets for 2000 to 2009, and I was in the building when a young South Florida program that was fledgling and built in the late 90s and kind of finding its way and bumping around, and had a lot of the same characteristics that this Georgia State university program has. It's commuter school, not a lot of fan support, and they make their rise, and they're continuing to build and build and build. And they went into Doak Campbell Stadium and knocked off the mighty Seminoles and announced their presence. And that was a humongous statement, flag in the ground. Hey, we're here. Fast forward to today, Georgia State landing a home and home, first and foremost, from a Sun Belt program. As we know, in this new college football playoff era, those opportunities are getting smaller and smaller. Power Four programs just aren't throwing bouquets to Sun Belt programs, or programs of the Group of Five ilk. And then you add in the factor that these are the two closest FBS institutions in the country. They're only
Yeah.
separated by just over 4 miles. Folks know both sides. They grew up going to games at Georgia Tech. If you talk to many Georgia State alums, the intertwining of their schools, whether you had undergraduate degrees at State or Tech and gone to the other for business school or other things, that matters. Georgia State has sold out their allotment of tickets. So anyone that wants to come in troll and, hey, Georgia State has no fans, well, they're showing up here for whatever Tech gave them and then some. They're showing up. I was been talking to folks. The lower level basically has a very limited amount of tickets, and I really do for the city. I hope it sells out because it has a great opportunity to be kind of a beacon for that program. We know Georgia Tech, they're rivals with the University of Georgia historically. They played, 100 million times. They played forever. This is the first ever matchup between Georgia State and Georgia Tech. Georgia Southern had their opportunity with Tech, had a great game a couple years back, and then Tech kind of swore them off there into the Paul Johnson era. So it's kudos to Tech for taking on a home and home with Georgia State. But I think the factors you mentioned, the 7-hour flight. I mean, Georgia Tech did not leave until Sunday, basically, to come back and make the 7-hour trek back to Atlanta. They'll be getting back into Atlanta late tonight. And no matter, these are 18 to 22-year-olds. Bryce, you and I have been around college football long enough, high school football long enough. Their emotions are going to sway, right? The coaching staff knows they want to get them in and get them locked in. School starts next week as well. You add that factor. You go to class. You're getting told how amazing you are. You're probably going to be ranked tomorrow. Coming out, have a top 10 win. Everyone's patting you on the back. You may not focus as much in film session. You may not, invest as much time. It happened. We've seen this with other programs in the Sun Belt almost annually. They come up and sneak at and grab somebody. And I think that's the one advantage that I will say Georgia State has. And of course, there's going to be a million other factors, right? We can certainly dive into the keys of the game as well, and we'll do it on our side all week. But I think ultimately, from an emotional side of things, there's probably a lot of guys on Georgia State's roster that are from Georgia who say, you know what, I probably should have got an offer. I should have got a look, or maybe I went to a camp at Tech. Maybe they should have offered me. There's a lot of that edge and that chip on the shoulder, basically, with a lot of players at the Group of Five level to say, listen, I'm as good as that guy. I should be playing over there. So now they have their opportunity to go out and show it and really leverage that game tape. And let's be honest, man, in the transfer portal era now, these guys want to put quality film against ACC opponents. They want to go out and say, look, what we did against a team that beat the number 10 team in the country in week 0. So there's a huge opportunity. I've called it arguably one of the most important games for Georgia State to date. Now, listen, a lot of things could happen. State could go and stub their toe as they have before in the past. But I will say, historically, Georgia State has played very, very well against Power 4 opponents. We saw that University of Tennessee, of course, the upset up there in week 1. Super hot day in August there. That Tennessee team, a lot of folks get fuzzy memories. After they lost to Georgia State and BYU, they proceeded to basically win 8 of the next 10 ball games and finish that
Yeah.
season 8-5. So that was not the season that Jeremy Pruitt got fired. Fast forward a couple of years, and Georgia State, was kind of struggling, stumbling there. Walks into Auburn and basically leads the Tigers the entire game. And if not for really a 4th and goal given up basically in the end zone, State probably pulls off that massive upset against their second SEC team ever. If you go back further, had an opportunity to go beat Wisconsin and Camp Randall. I just think that the style that Tech plays, I think the opportunity and just the unknown really with Georgia State's entire roster and coaching staff just really, really leads for Georgia State kind of the perfect mix here. If this game was in week 5, week 6, week 7, I probably wouldn't be saying the same thing. But there's a lot of factors that go the Panthers' way right now, and it's just really up to them to capitalize on Saturday night.
I'll also add this. I got got to watch firsthand. It's different leadership, different team. Last year, Georgia State come in and kind of blow for blow in that first quarter, 20 and a half minute, 25 minutes, go blow to blow with the Heisman Trophy winner down here in Death Valley. So, that was a fun time to kind of watch that group kind of go toe to toe with the best offense in the country last year. So, you talk about this Georgia State program, they're not going to shy away from that big stage and the opportunity. But let's kind of just talk about both sides of the football here. You mentioned a lot of unknowns. Georgia Tech can recognize, fans can recognize some of the names on that offensive side of the football. Obviously, Zach Gibson's a guy that, had I would say, the best way to describe it, Ben, might be kind of the highest of highs and the lowest of lows when he was in Atlanta. But bottom line, when I was covering Georgia Tech full time, and even now we're doing this, the kid's a gamer. He had a chip on his shoulder when he transferred into Tech because he was looked over that time, and now he probably feels like he's looked over again. So Ben, if he is indeed the starter, what can Tech fans expect out of him, and maybe just this offense as a whole? That you look down the list: transfer, 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 running back room completely remodeled. They've got some dudes. Like we've been out at practice a couple times too. I was impressed with their size, their length of the wide receiver position, and the tight end spot.
That's the biggest thing that jumps off the page. Go the first day of fall camp, being able to see kind of the transfers that have come from a lot of different places. But there's a lot of Power Four transfers on this roster. You're going to have massive size. You're probably going to have a former Penn State signee at left tackle. You're probably going to have offensive linemen who have played at Power Four programs. As you mentioned, Zach Gibson, I do expect him to be the quarterback, probably take the first snap. But Dell's been open as well. He wants the best 11 on both sides of the ball. They have athletes all over the place. The one thing that really jumps off the page, especially for the Sun Belt, is most Sun Belt programs or even Group of Five programs, you're going to have guys of a significant size, maybe one or two guys. The Panthers line up at least 4 or 5 guys that are 6'3", 6'4", and can really, really move. And that's the one thing that Dell wanted to do, is come in here and improve the size, get the athleticism way up. He wants guys that have run track. He wants guys that can move in space. He wants guys that can go out and jump up and get the ball. He's completely remodeled both lines of scrimmage. But offensively, you mentioned the running back room, completely overhaul. I mean, SEC fans, folks that are fans of big time college football. Marcus Carroll was one of the best running backs in the country last year. As you mentioned, he had a nice game there in Death Valley against LSU. He's now a Missouri Tiger. So once he kind of exited the transfer portal, a lot of Panther fans looking around like, well, one of the better rushing attacks in the country is disappearing. Well, Sean Elliott in his brief time there in 2024, and then Dell came in there and completely overhauled it. Reached out into Coastal Carolina transfer C.J. Beasley, went and got Jordan Ford from Tulsa, guys that were productive. Savion Wilkerson from Colorado, who really didn't get a chance to see the field there for Coach Prime there in Boulder, but guys that are quick, guys that can move, and as we've seen, really with Dell being in charge, even up in Athens, he will play multitude of running backs and really wants to keep a lot of guys going. So they know, hey, look, there can be 3 or 4 guys that can be in the mix, just depending on the play, depending on the opportunity. What I find fascinating, certainly coming off Saturday's game, is Tech really limited possessions for the entire ball game
Yeah.
with the new clock rules and communication and things that way. Dell has talked about that a lot, is having former NFL coaches on the staff, knowing how to use the new timeouts, the new communication on both sides of the ball with the players to the field. So there's a comfort level there where I think in the first few weeks, especially in this week one, as everybody gets started, if you really haven't tried that or don't have experience to draw on that from your staff, it's going to be all new. It's going to be a whole new world, and you're going to see some issues with that. They also did specifically, former NFL head coach Hugh Jackson is on Dell McGee's staff and went through a basically huge presentation several times talking about 2-minute offense. So we saw that yesterday with the first 2-minute drill stoppages there. So talking about 2-minute offenses, how to play that, these little nuanced pieces that we really weren't thinking about or talking about before. So I think the plan certainly offensively, Georgia State's going to have to control the ball just as they have in previous games against Power Four opponents, because they want to get out there in a haymaker versus haymaker. It's probably not going to end very well for the Panthers, but they feel confident, they feel comfortable, and as I mentioned a little bit earlier, they have 4 quarters of game tape on Tech and know kind of the personnel, and I think this is going to come down to really who can execute their offensive game plan, and that's literally going to be the name of the game on Saturday night.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised, and I mentioned this in our live reaction show after the Florida State win for Georgia Tech, was the way that Georgia Tech dictated things in the trenches. I think that shocked not only me, but really kind of every media pundit that was out there. I mean, look, we entered that game thinking Tyler Santucci, new defensive coordinator, was that going to be enough to really overhaul, just especially in the first game of the season? A lot of the questions, Ben, that I had about this team, they were answered in week one, but I have said multiple times already in the past 24 hours, you have to do that week in, week out. That felt really, really good on Saturday. So when you talk about the trenches, maybe on both sides of the football, and then we'll kind of go really talk about that defense too, but what has that been like in terms of finding the right pieces? I remember when we were out there a couple times this fall and looking. And Dell had said, hey, we're going to work in guys where everybody can nearly play every position because you don't know what can happen over the course of a 12-game season. Kind of your thoughts and your feeling on where they're at in that. Have they set five guys they feel comfortable with? And maybe are they 5, 6, 7 guys deep on that offensive line?
Yeah, that's the interesting part. Last year, coming off in the spring, you had a few guys come back. I think there was 12 offensive linemen, 13 offensive linemen that started spring practice with former head coach Sean Elliott. Uh, Dell came in there and basically completely overhauled the offensive line. I think only 5 or 6 scholarship players, and with several that had starting experience at a variety of different spots. The one kind of strange thing last year with all the bowl opt outs along the offensive line, you have a draftee and Travis Glover at left tackle who doesn't play in the bowl game. So guess what? That slides a backup in there. You have guys that may have played guard who were forced to play tackle, or centers that moved along the line. So having that kind of necessary versatility, not only in one game last year in Idaho in the Potato Bowl out there in late December, but fast forward to spring, and then really Dell got to evaluate this roster and find the guys. All right,
Mhm.
who's best at center here? Who's best at left guard, right guard, tackle? Where can we go? And then what needs do we need to address? And they hammered the portal. They loaded up. Yeah, I think the number was close to 25 players added in the spring portal session, which is for a group of 5 program, an insanely high number. But a lot of those were on the offensive and defensive line. So I do think there is a set ones group, but I think you have guys like Trevor Timmons who played multiple positions at Charlotte and at Georgia State, along, having starts basically at the guard position, playing backup reps in a bowl opportunity and things like that. A guy like Alec Johnson, who was a starting center last year for Georgia State in the bowl game, who, kind of went through the freshman roller coaster, right? What is the old saying? The best thing about freshmen is they become sophomores. Well, he's a redshirt sophomore now, so he's gotten some playing time. He's got practice, and a lot of the photos and video that has kind of come out. You see, Alec and having an opportunity there as well. But being able to integrate those guys, as you mentioned, cross train guys, tackle, guard, because if there is an injury, if there is a situation where a guy loses a helmet, needs to come out, you can kind of plug and play and have guys ready. So that's the biggest thing with this roster, is there probably wasn't a lot of depth, and that was a concerning area walking into spring practice. Now, basically, you exit fall camp last Friday, and you feel pretty good. You got probably 8, 9, 10 guys that reasonably can play and step in and have an opportunity to do that. And then behind that, as most group of 5 programs, you get pretty young, right? You're going to get
Yeah.
redshirt freshmen, redshirt, sophomores, things like that, guys that have maybe only been on the scout team and things like that. But I think the one area that I will say, and we can certainly talk about it for a lot longer, is they have loaded up on the defensive line. That was a
Yeah.
massive, massive overhaul. And they went into the transfer portal and got some big time names of guys who have covered college recruiting, like Bishop Thomas, who was at Colorado and at Florida State, going out and getting Sir Mills, who signed with the University of Oregon out of high school. Big 6'4", 300-pound guy that can play inside, outside, play tackle, play nose. You don't see too many dudes like that in Sunbelt programs.
Yeah.
So they are not going to get blasted away on the offensive line. But credit to Tech, I watched the same thing you did. That offensive line, that front 5, really manhandled what is expected to be one of the best defensive lines, not only in the ACC but the country for week 1. But to
Yeah.
your point, now getting these guys up at second game when it's not Florida State on the helmet, or not Georgia, or not Clemson, or not Miami. This is Georgia State. They've never seen
Yeah.
them before. It's the motivation may not be as high. And again, a lot of these factors there, where this isn't, certainly the Georgia State of old, where, they're 130th in total defense. These guys want to go, especially in the front 7. Linebacker, you have a tremendous amount of experience as well at Georgia State, where you got redshirt seniors at multiple spots, guys that have seen the field, been in the trenches, been in the battles for 25 plus games. So I think that's a huge factor as well, as being able to stop that run. Which team is going to be able to dictate there within their front 7?
Let's talk more about that defense. You and I were texting last night when we set this up. Look, if there's one person that's going to know what Haynes King likes to do or can't do, or maybe look at his weaknesses, it's got to be Georgia State defensive coordinator Kevin Scher, who is obviously the DC and obviously worked with the linebackers coach over there at Georgia Tech under Brent Key. Your thoughts on how that might help this Georgia State team? I mean, one would logically say that Haynes King has probably, hopefully, grown from last year to this year. You would see that, but look, I mean, it's a guy that watched him every single day in practice, his group go up against him. if there is a key or if there is a positive, it's that, hey, now he's going to be on your sideline. If you're Del McGee, you know what that guy brings to the table, as well as Jamal Haynes, that group of receivers, and really this offensive line that we were talking about for Tech that did impress on Saturday.
No, no question. And you know the weaknesses, you know the strengths, you know where basically where they feel uncomfortable when they get pressure, right? So if you're gonna, if it's a run heavy, where do you run blitz? Where do you send, pressure? Where can you read keys? Where's his field of vision? Where's his preference? No matter what, when a quarterback drops back, they're going to look a certain direction, right? The one thing that I was impressed with, Tech really didn't have to throw the ball,
Yeah.
consistently on Saturday, so they weren't really tested. I fully expect them to try to test the defensive backs there. So sheer knowing that and knowing how good this Tech offense can be, especially on the outside with Singleton and a couple other young guys, like there are guys that can run, that can fly. So there's going to be stress put on this Panthers defensive backfield. But there's also experience back there too. You got Jeremiah Johnson back in the backfield who had a fantastic year. One of the best corners in the country is
Mm-hmm.
Gavin Pringle, and a guy that was another portal guy. Went to FCS. He was at Bucknell. Most folks probably didn't think two times or three times around the Sun Belt, and he's an All Sun Belt first team guy, and single handedly won a game with a game sealing interception down there in Louisiana against the Raging Cajuns. And another guy that just makes the right plays. Opposite him is going to be Kenyatta Watson, who, oh, by the way, played at Tech last year and came up in the program. So, and his daddy was on staff there. So there's going to be some interesting feelings there with Sure and Kenyatta Watson. And we'll see how much they were able to glean, because when you're in those film rooms and you're in that practice room, as you mentioned, every single day, you're going to know the good, the bad, the ugly with your opponent. And I think that's certainly going to conspire to a whole lot of fun, especially early. You're going to see a lot of guys that want to make plays on both sides of the ball to get one up there on their former coach and former teammate.
Well, last one here for you, man. And this is kind of, we get into that keys aspect of this. If I gave you the sentence, Georgia State wins this game if, what are maybe one or two, maybe three things that have to happen if Georgia State's going to have success on Saturday? And like to your standpoint, sustain that, not just a first quarter, competing and then we see Tech pull away. What would have to happen if for Georgia State to really win this game?
Yeah, I think it starts to me always with turnovers. You win the turnover battle. We really didn't see that being a factor. There was a bunch of near turnovers Tech had on Saturday where the ball just happened to bounce one way. Bad snaps can happen, especially early in the season. Penalties. We know are always a bugaboo there and have been for Tech for quite some time. Staying on the field, I think the team that controls the clock, both teams are going to want to run the ball. Don't kid
Yeah.
yourself. Georgia State has built their bread and butter in the last 6-7 years under Sean Elliott as being a run first, 65% of the time run the ball. Being physical at the line of scrimmage. Every coach wants to do that, right? You want to win the line of scrimmage, but that's also converting on third downs, making sure you're staying out of those third and 9, 3rd and 8 opportunities, not taking negative plays. I think turnovers, I think the third down percentage, and really ball control. If the Panthers, that's the one thing that has been, just a constant with Georgia State. I think I ran the numbers that they were somewhere in the neighborhood of about 80% win percentage when they ran for over 200 yards in a game. And that's combined. Of course, you had dual threat quarterbacks, as Georgia Tech does as well. And the one thing that I think a lot of Tech fans may not have seen from Zach Gibson, he can get out a little bit. He's not the athlete that
Yeah.
Haynes King is, but he will get out of the way. He can move it on, and you get these broken plays, these broken opportunities, things that happen on the field, wide receiver slips or something happens. Find a way to move the chains a little bit. Hey, it's 3rd and 4, and I'm able to scramble for 5 yards and get out of bounds. Looking for those opportunities and really just being able to go and hold on to the ball, staying out of those three and outs. And we saw that in the third quarter with FSU and Tech. There was a lot of back and forth, kind of feeling folks out after the locker room, and then that fourth quarter kind of was a little bit more of a haymaker back and forth. So I think those win the turnover margin, stay clean basically on third down and make sure you hold on to the football. And this should be a fourth quarter game. If not, I think Tech can certainly score it out and have the opportunity and the offensive explosiveness to escape. But I do think there's a whole lot of factors. If they go well, Georgia State will be in this game all 4 quarters and make Tech fans a little bit nervous there on North Avenue.
Well, Ben, like you said, I mean, this is certainly going to be an interesting football game. A lot of factors coming into play. And for our viewers and watchers and listeners, if they want to read more about the Georgia State side of things or get more insight on that, where can they find? Well, I'm sure you guys are going to be doing a great kind of in-depth preview. I know we talked a little bit about the pieces you're going to be doing, but let them know where they can find you on social media and panthertalk.com as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Ben Moore 24/7 on all outlets, just to make it easy. And as you mentioned, panthertalk.com, have a great staff writer in Brady Weiler who covers us front to back and makes me look really, really smart for bringing him on the team. Does a great job there in the media row, press row. He'll be there. Bobby Dodd on Saturday, and we'll have Chris Hilliard as well jump in. He's my fantastic columnist, former intern, and then he grew up and did a bunch of stuff. And I've been fortunate a couple of years to bring him back. So he always has his perspective from he and I have been able to cover the team since the beginning of the program, basically in 2009, and then first season under Bill Curry, of course, Tech coach and Tech graduate, who I hope is at the game. I actually texted Coach Curry today, so I'm hoping to hear if he's back. And again, as you mentioned, teased a little bit and alluded to, we'll be talking about a little bit of the connections between the two universities, both on and off the field. There's a lot of them. These
Yeah.
two programs have Georgia State came up, and you'll see some shirts, some throwback shirts from time to time around Panther family, where they will have the Georgia Tech or Georgia Evening School of Commerce, where if you go back and talk to any athlete at Tech during that time, there's a lot of folks that took a lot of classes back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s who were athletes at Georgia Tech, and took a night school class or two over at the Concrete campus. So the two schools are intertwined in a lot of ways. I'm excited to see it, man. I'm hoping folks come out. There's going to be, it should be a great atmosphere there at Bobby Dodd Stadium under the lights. One of my favorite venues, candidly,
Yeah.
all around college football. Bobby Dodd at night is just different. It really is. Has a different tone and sense with Atlanta in the background. You and I are Georgia guys who've been around the city of Atlanta for a long time as well. So this one has all the makings. I'm just glad it's not talking season anymore. It's actually game week, so we can actually talk about things on the field. So I'm jacked and excited to talk about it. And appreciate you having me, man.
Yeah, Ben Moore, 247 Sports, covering all things Georgia State and also a lot of recruiting in that metro Atlanta area as well. Ben, we appreciate it, man. Another Behind the Enemy Lines podcast, and we'll get you ready for that game on Saturday. I'm just glad it's an 8 p.m. kickoff. We might avoid a little bit of the heat. We'll have to see how the weather holds up, but that heat maybe won't kill us out there on
Yeah,
Saturday.
no doubt about it. Tailgate temperatures hopefully will be a little bit easier, and better than a noon or 3:30. You always worry about the first week of September because you look up and you're like, all right, it's still 90 degrees and 80% humidity there at the pregame. But glad it's here at 8 p.m. and the sun will be down, lights will be on, and it should cool off a little bit.
Ben Moore, 247 Sports, talking all things Georgia State ahead of this Georgia Tech, Georgia State game. A little intercity rivalry. Going to be a lot of fun to watch these two teams match up. Make sure you check out all that he has. We're going to link that down in the bio, whether you're watching this on YouTube or in podcast form, wherever you're listening to us. We appreciate that as well. And we'll catch you throughout the week. Swarm Talk, Crowded Booth, talking college football all week long. Week one is finally here, ladies and gentlemen. We'll catch you next time here on the Swarm.